Get out!
Hello tankers and tankettes, welcome to a tank review. Today I'm looking at a German heavy and I'm looking at a tier 8 German heavy and I'm looking at this tier 8 German heavy because there are two of them to choose from. There's the Tiger 2 which leads up to the E100, and then there's this, the VK45.02 A, which leads to the mouse. And yeah, as you can see, I'm a bit further on with this than I am the Tiger 2, because I've had the Tiger 2 for about a week now, whereas this I've been grinding for a little while, as you can tell. As you can see, I'm also fairly close to getting the next one up, so I thought I'd do a review of this thing now. It's also kind of fitting because I've done a review of the previous one on the line, the Tiger P, so there's a bit of continuity going on there as well. So, like I said, this is the one that comes after the Tiger P, leads up to the mouse. What kind of a machine is it? Well, it's not really a heavy in the sense that you'd think of as the other German heavies being necessarily. It doesn't really fit with any of the other German heavies. It's certainly not really anything like the Tiger 2. If I had to compare it to anything, it would be the French AMX M4, maybe, or the FCM50T even. It's that style of mobile heavy. It's less about armour and more about mobility. So I'm going to do my usual thing. I'm going to split it up into pros and cons as I see them. Obviously it's worth checking out other people's reviews as always, but I think this is a lesser seen tank, so I thought it might be one of interest to you guys and gals as well. So what does it have going for it? Well, like I said, primarily it is about mobility. This thing can shift around the battlefield at a pretty reasonable rate. The speed and traverse are actually identical to the Tiger, but this is both lighter and it has a more powerful engine, so therefore the horsepower to ton ratio is actually a lot better than the Tiger 2. It's in fact, I looked it up, it's actually about equal and slightly better than the E50. So this thing can move around the battlefield at a reasonable pace. It's not that fast, but you're going to get up to that speed limit quite easily, which is not so much the case with the Tiger 2. That's more of a, going downhill, you'll hit that speed. It's something, that mobility of it really is the main feature of this tank. You need to make use of that. You need to be almost thinking about when you're playing it. You need to almost treat it like a medium tank and be looking for flanking opportunities, because that's where its strength lies, and it really does. It needs to make use of that mobility for you to get the best out of it, because if you're just treating it like a normal heavy tank, you're going to really struggle with it for various reasons that I'll get to. Like I said, the engine's good. The weight is actually it's more than 10 tons lighter than the Tiger 2. So even though the traverse there is identical, actually this thing will effectively traverse better on most types of terrain because you've got lower ground pressure, so therefore you're turning better, and that really comes in useful sometimes. You can't quite keep up with the medium tanks in this thing, but you can do okay. You won't be far behind them. The armor is okay-ish, depending what you're facing, and I say okay-ish. The armor on this one is one where it falls into both pros and cons. If you're facing lower tiers, then actually you can bounce some stuff. The upper front plate is, you see there, it's 120mm. It's sloped. It's actually sloped about the same as the Tiger 2, but it has got some weak spots, notably there, and still the commander's hatch, which isn't the case on the Tiger 2 anymore. But if you're facing lower tiers, that's actually sufficient. A lot of tier 7s will bounce off that armor if you're angled. Even same tier mediums, some of them will bounce off that armor. So if you're facing same tier and lower, the armor can do some things, but if you're facing same tier heavies, maybe not so much. So that does, that coupled with mobility makes this actually quite good though at beating up lower tier tanks. It's somewhat like the BDR G1B in that regard. You can get in their faces if it's a couple of. Let's say you've got some backup and you see a couple of tier 7 heavies that are hiding around the corner. You can basically lead the charge and go and beat them up quite effectively. Although if you're completely outnumbered, then your armor's not going to save you, because then you're just going to be surrounded. The rest of the armor is, 80 sides and rear. It's okay, but it's not great. What else? It's got a decent number of hit points. 1570 is all right. It's better than some, not quite as good as others, but that's on the sort of higher end of the scale in terms of tier 8 heavies. It's all right. And it's also got a pretty good view range, 390 meters, like the Tiger II. Pretty much because it has the same turret as the Tiger II, I think. They've given them very, very similar stats in terms of armor and view range. Although there are some differences, I will say. They're not identical turrets. The turret, you'll notice, is actually quite far forward on this tank, and I think that hurts you more than it helps you a lot of the time. But there are some situations where that might come in useful. And yeah, I don't think there's really... I mean, the turret is good on this, but it's actually a bit inferior to the Tiger II's turret. I've already said that's a weak spot, but there are other reasons. One of the differences actually is it's slightly lower traverse speed, but that doesn't really affect it too much when your hull traverse is effectively better. So, like I've said, the main strength of this tank, I mean, it is all about the mobility. Foch actually prefers this to the Tiger II, from what he said, because you have that mobility, you have that extra kind of capacity to get around the battlefield, go and reset a cap, go and reinforce another flank. That's what this tank is good at, because you're taking a reasonably punchy gun with you, and also your heavy tank hit points and some armor, and you might be able to turn the tide of a flank that's being rushed by a couple of enemy mediums, for instance, more so than if you were in a medium tank yourself. That's the kind of thing where this tank can excel, and that's the kind of situations you should be looking for, really. Of course, it does have some downsides, and they're quite significant ones. The guns are they're adequate at best. The top gun is the middle gun on the Tiger II, and its 200 penetration on a tier 8 tank is a bit lackluster. There are premium tanks at tier 8, the FCM50T gets more penetration than that, but at least it's got 320 alpha, and the aim time isn't too bad, and accuracy's alright as well, and you're gonna need that accuracy because oh no, that's the wrong gun, that's the Tiger II gun. The accuracy, there we go, 0.37. 0.37 is okay, but it's a bit lackluster at longer ranges. You kind of need to be a bit closer to actually make use of that, because you're going to have to be aiming at weak spots a lot with this thing. But if you make the shots connect, then yeah, 320 alpha, it's fairly punchy in that regard. The gun depression is actually worse than the Tiger II. I don't know why. It's the same turret, but it is. It's 2 degrees worse off, so you're going to struggle a lot with terrain. You really have to bear that in mind on some maps, like, say, Serene Coast or Sand River is another one. With all the dunes, that really works against you in those circumstances. You end up having to expose a lot of your tank in order to take shots. So that is a bad situation. You don't want to be in that if at all possible. But some maps you're kind of forced to actually be in, to show more of your tank than you want to, or to drive up a bit of terrain, and it's just, sometimes you can't avoid it, and in those circumstances it just sucks. The turret traverse, I've already mentioned, is a bit slower. I've already mentioned also the weak spots. If somebody, the lower tiers are smart, they will still aim here and here. It's like I've said, it's not really a tank for going up against same tier heavies. But if you can get around them while your other teammates are engaging them, then it works well in that circumstance. And when you're facing higher tiers, that pretty much is the only way you want to be playing it. You don't want to face higher tiers head to head ever. Even same tier tank destroyers will just nail you. There's very little chance they'll bounce, unless you get a very lucky bounce off the turret, because 120 frontal armor is just not sufficient really with that kind of sloping. It's also not very good at side scraping because of that 80 armor, as I've mentioned, but that doesn't really seem to be a feature of many German tanks, side scraping. once you get to tier 9 and 10, yes, they get better at it, but up to tier 8, they just don't seem to be terribly good, generally speaking. And yeah, it's just there's a lot of situations where this tank will do poorly, and a lot of situations where it'll do really well. I think that is, I'm going to say, the biggest flaw of this tank is that it is actually very, very situational. It's not a well-rounded tank. It is good at some things, it is bad at others. And okay, that's a very general statement to make, and you can make that against about a lot of tanks, but this feels, it's a very asymmetric tank. If you don't get to use what it's good at, then you're probably going to just die horribly, unless you get really lucky. I would also say with the gun, it's a good idea to have a fair few APCR rounds there loaded, because you're going to need them against a lot of targets, even same tier heavies, same tier tank destroyers. You're going to fail hard otherwise. You don't have enough accuracy to aim for weak spots at long ranges, and you don't have enough penetration either. But it's not a horrible gun, though. That gun, coupled with the mobility, I mean, it's a bit like the T-32 in that regard. It has certain compensations for having a lackluster gun. The T-32 has got an amazing turret and good gun depression. This thing has got good mobility and the ability to act in some ways, in some situations, as almost a medium tank. That's really when it's strongest. I will say, before we move on to the next section, that my best game ever is actually has apparently been in the VK. I don't know how, but yeah, there we go, 2006-26 in the VK45.02 A. I think it might even have been my ace tanker game. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, you can do really, really well in this tank. And there are some situations, especially if you're up against less experienced tanks, lower tiers, when you can use the speed to be aggressive, and you can just really bully them, lead a charge basically. And it can work well in that regard sometimes. That's when that mobility pays off as well, not just in flanking, but in being aggressive and pushing on people. But you need to have something to back that up with. You can't do that on your own, obviously, because you'll just die pretty quickly if you do. So, yeah, it's a fairly interesting tank. It's not going to be for everyone, though, that's for sure, because if you're not really comfortable with medium tanks at all, then you might struggle with this thing. My win rate's been okay, but it's not been anything special. It's a tank I've had some good matches in, but it's not a keeper by any means. I will say also, again, before I move on to the next section, that this video, this entire review, might well become irrelevant in even as short a space as a few months. There's talk of heavy rebalancing, at least for the tier 9 VK, and at some point the tier 9 VK hull might well get folded into the tier 8, because researchable hull modules are going to be a thing at some point. So I will do my usual thing. We'll put up the armor scheme and a suggested upgrade path, and then we'll move on to some actual gameplay. So here we are in a battle. It's Lakeville, it's encounter mode, and this is actually a game from 0.87, I think. This was my VK, it would have been first class, yes, first class mastery game, and it was quite a nice match, and I think it will showcase quite nicely why that mobility is really the strength of this tank. So, top tier, which is always nice. There's actually only a couple of tier 8s on each side, so this is actually a really good matchup for the VK. This means there's plenty of lower tiers around where your armor actually is going to be more effective. Some of them not so much. I mean, the Tiger has got enough penetration certainly, but the IS, the KV1Ss, the T150, these are all ones that actually, if you're angling, they might struggle with your armor somewhat. So yeah, I'm gonna go in the valley initially because I'm a top tier heavy and they might make a push. There's also no artillery. I know I've actually got mobility enough to get back into town if things go horribly wrong there. And also, I mean, look at the minimap. The majority of the team is actually going to town. So I thought, okay, this is going to be fairly comfortable. We're not going to have to worry too much. Apologies for the jerkiness of this replay, maybe because it is an older replay. Some replay files are just like that, I don't quite know why. It doesn't really seem to make a difference what settings you use in the game, but at least the reticle thing is not a thing anymore. Wow, that was completely cogent. Yeah, I'm always so coherent, right guys? Right? So I've got the IS-3 with me as well, which is a bit of a pity. I wish he'd gone into town, or that I'd gone into town, but either way, we've both got terrible gun depression, basically. I'm going to take a peek, and if it looks clear on the other side, it might be safe to push. It just depends. Fighting over the hill is not going to work because, like I said, this does not have good gun depression, this tank. I mean, German heavies are not especially known for it, but this is even worse than the Tiger II, like I was saying in the review portion. There's a KV1S back there, but I'm not being shot by anything bigger than that, it looks like. And there's no... I mean, let's say there's no enemy tank destroyers to worry about. The ARL, if he's got the big gun, actually has more than enough penetration. But given what's shooting us, I think I'm going to go for it, because it's two mediums. One of them's a tier 6 medium, and I'm actually bouncing some good shots here, so... this is a situation where actually, like I said, beating up lower tiers, this is what this tank is really good at. Just putting pressure on these guys. Now, the town side is looking a bit iffy. They're not really pushing the capital. They're being very defensive. And wow, that shot! I shot underneath him, so well done me, well done. The IS-3 with me is full health as well. He also, you know, the IS-3 is another reasonably speedy tank, but it's got more effective armor than the VK does. I think it's actually 110 frontal for IS-3, but because it's got that pike nose, it'll bounce a lot more stuff than the VK will. Though the VK's armor is, you know, like I said, it's effective under some circumstances. So we know there's a KV1S there. If he shoots me in the side, that's going to be bad, but he seems to have backed way the hell off. The guys in town are getting encircled. They weren't being aggressive, they were being completely defensive, and they've let themselves get encircled, so this is pretty bad. We're actually being capped, and it's not looking good at this stage at all. That IS-3 just took a hit from something lurking over on the other side. SU-100 and KV-1S in the middle. I don't know why I don't know why. There we go, our IS went to the middle, but it's a good thing at least somebody was, because that's 3 enemy units. Oh, there's that ARL, okay. Gotta nail this guy, because if he's got the bigger gun, then that's bad for me. Now somebody's reset or driven out the cap or something, so we're not in imminent danger of losing just yet. It might be the enemy team actually decided that they would get away with killing us all rather than trying to cap it out, because you get more points that way. It's so annoying when you have a team where basically hardly anyone does damage and they just cap, and it's like, yeah, we got my daily double was 500 XP, yay. Anyway, back of an IS, that's not a problem for this gun. 347, that was a reasonably high roll. That's quite nice. Our IS is in serious trouble. The T20 is probably going to kill him, but I'm going to move up on this ARL. I really have to concentrate on getting to the cap, basically. I am taking a slightly roundabout route to do it, though. I don't think I was doing the best thing here, and I don't know why I stopped to look when I knew I couldn't hit the T20. Well, that was just yeah, the ARL guy complaining about being in an ARL, and yeah, I feel for you, buddy. It's not the best tank. Now, they didn't get totally overrun. Kudos to the guys in town. They've actually kind of they got pushed back so far, but no farther, as it were. So I'm in a situation where I'm coming up with full health as well. I'm coming up on these guys, and I'm sort of, you know, the relief of the Siege of Mafeking style situation. I'm turning up just in time, pretty much. And it also means that the enemies I'm facing, they're all pretty battered and bruised as well. And that is a good thing with this gun, because that is a situation where I can just clean up, basically. And this has all been possible because of the mobility. I've driven basically all the way around the map, and hello, KV1S, who's just totally AFK, so let's just give him a little love tap. There's really not much left to clean up at this point, but you can see the amount of damage I've done here is 3k damage. You know, if you get the right targets, this gun's pretty nice. That Lurvus finally succumbs, but took his tracks. I've at this point, you know, this is I'm really not panicking at all. It's these guys and a T20 somewhere. And oh yeah, T20 is still in the middle, because that was a shot from that guy. Even if I take a hit from the IS, oh, he tracks me, but I haven't taken any damage. So there, that turret traverse, new, so slow. And wow, good job, Jedi, good job. But if you look at the traverse on that, actually, that's not bad at all for a heavy tank. When you get when you don't get tracked. Anyway, so that's yeah, that T20 is still in the middle, and he's low health. I think we can take this guy, and SU-100 gets him. So there we go, 5 kills. Nearly 4k damage. It's one of those games where you don't think you've done that much damage, and then you get to the end and look at the score screens and you think, actually, oh, okay, that was quite good, really. That was, like I said, first class. I was right. Steel wall, because lots of lower tiers. I was beating up lots of lower tiers. I did a pretty nice amount of damage, like I said, and on the whole, I think I wouldn't have gotten away with that in really many other tanks. I mean, even other mobile tanks, like, for instance, the AMX-5100 or the Tier 7, the AMX M4, you would have struggled, because even against those enemies I was facing, I would have taken more damage. In fact, the only tank I can think of that might have gotten away with it is the FCM-50T, because that has, it's the same with the frontal armor on that thing. It's good against some tanks, not good against others, and it's got that same mobility, but a far less punchy gun, even though, you know, a bit more penetration. It's standard 90mm damage, 240 alpha average. So I think, yeah, that was a pretty good result, and that is something that that kind of situation is where the VK can really shine. The problem is, of course, getting games where you have those kind of circumstances, and the game is going to troll you sometimes. It just is. There's going to be occasions when you get a team and you can't do absolutely anything at all. You're just going to die horribly. But if you have that medium tank mentality, as I've been saying, then this can be a pretty nice machine. It does have a bit of a reputation. I don't think it's wholly deserved. I think it's just, it's on a line that leads to the mouse, which not that many people actually go for, and it's a heavy tank that doesn't really have very good armor, so that puts people off, and of course the gun as well. But if you play it right, you can do pretty nicely. So yeah, would I say it's a fun tank in its own right? Well, I don't know about fun. It's not one I would keep necessarily in my garage, but it's not an unpleasant grind, let me put it that way. As I want to go to the mouse, this thing is actually alright. The one at tier 9 has a worse reputation, and I'm going to see shortly if that's deserved or not, because I'm not that far off getting the tier 9. But this thing is actually okay. It's a reasonable enough tank. It's, like I've said, it's like the T32. It's a better combination than just the pure stats would suggest, if you play it right, and that's the key, if you play it right. So hopefully this has been a useful look at this not very often seen tank. If you thought so, you can hit the like button, you can leave a comment, you can subscribe to my channel, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.